and welcome back to the channel. I hope that everybody is doing well today. If you are new here, then hi, my name is Brittany and I'm a nurse practitioner, and I'm also the creator of the Brittany Holzbeck NP Review. It is a total AANP and ANCC review course available on my Patreon. It's the most affordable and comprehensive review on the market right now, and it is also eligible for continuing education credits. So nurses and nurse practitioners alike can take the course. There's also a $5 tier where there's just lots of clinical pearls and tips for the new nurse practitioner. So if you want to check it out, everything will be linked in the description box below. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about a new ruling from the Alabama Supreme Court. So just last week, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that embryos created through the IVF process are now considered children under the state law. Have you guys heard about this? Let me say that again. Under the Alabama state law, embryos are considered children. And this is a little bit wild. What do you guys think? Have you heard of this? And what kind of implications now does this have? So because of this new ruling, if an embryo that's created through IVF is destroyed, then this is subject to legislation dealing with the wrongful death of a minor. Hear that again, because honestly, coming out of my mouth, it sounds crazy to me. If an embryo is destroyed, it is subject to legislation that is dealing with wrongful death of a minor. So this new ruling, where an embryo is now considered a child through the Alabama state law, has actually allowed for a lawsuit to take place. So I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit, give you some background, and then kind of talk to you about my opinion, and I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys as well. So what allegedly occurred as a patient of a reproductive medical center had trespassed an area that was housing these embryos. Somehow was handling these, which I'm not exactly sure the backstory there, very odd, but allegedly burned his hand on this freezer, because we know these embryos have to be kept very, very cold. And in the process of burning himself on this deep freeze, he actually dropped these embryos and destroyed these embryos. And so now 3 families are actually suing the medical facility for negligence, but also wrongful death of a minor. And just saying that seems really, really crazy to me. I don't know a better word for it. And so I want to read a little bit from the lawsuit here. I'll actually link the full document in the description box below, and you can go ahead and read that for yourself. But I'm going to read a little bit here and just give you guys a little bit of background. So it says, the plaintiffs in these consolidated appeals are the parents of several embryonic children, each of whom was created through in vitro fertilization or IVF, and until the incident giving rise to these cases had been kept alive in a cryogenic nursery while they awaited implantation. The plaintiffs allege that the center was obligated to keep the cryogenic nursery secured and monitored at all times, but in December 2020, a patient at the hospital managed to wander into the center's fertility clinic through an unsecured doorway, then entered the cryogenic nursery and removed several embryos. The sub-zero temperatures at which the embryos had been stored freeze-burned the patient's hand, causing the patient to drop the embryos on the floor and killing them. The plaintiffs brought 2 lawsuits against the center and the association. So the first suit was brought jointly by the party A, we'll call them, and party B, and the second was brought by party C. So each set of plaintiffs asserted claims under Alabama's Wrongful Death of a Minor Act. In the alternative, each set of plaintiffs asserted common law claims of negligence or negligence and wantonness, for which they sought compensatory damages, including damages from mental anguish and emotional distress. The plaintiffs specified, however, that their common law claims were pleaded in the alternative and only apply should the courts of this state or the United States Supreme Court ultimately rule that an extrauterine embryo is not a minor child but is instead property. The parties to these cases have raised many difficult questions, including ones about the ethical status of extrauterine children, the application of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution to such children, and the public policy implications of treating extrauterine children as human beings. But the court today need not address these questions because, as explained below, the relevant statutory text is clear. The Wrongful Death of a Minor Act applies on its face to all unborn children without limitation. Before analyzing the parties' disagreement about the scope of the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act, we begin by explaining some background points of agreement. All parties to these cases, like all members of this court, agree that an unborn child is a genetically unique human being whose life begins at fertilization and ends at death. The parties further agree that an unborn child usually qualifies as a human life, human being, or person, as those words are used in ordinary conversation and in the text of Alabama's wrongful death statutes. That is true, as everyone acknowledges, throughout all stages of an unborn child's development, regardless of viability. So we can hear that somebody did trespass and somebody did destroy these embryos. And I do think that this is subject to a lawsuit. I mean, we know that IVF is very expensive. We can be talking $15,000, sometimes upwards of $30,000 per round of IVF. Aside from finances, obviously the emotional investments that goes into this. I mean, it is devastating that this was to happen. But to consider an embryo an extrauterine child and be able to consider this a wrongful death of a minor, that is absolutely mind-boggling. And because of this new liability, now we see these Alabama IVF clinics putting a halt to their IVF treatments. And it's really easy to see why they would be so apprehensive to continue these treatments. You just can't help but wonder where we're going to draw the line. If a family decides not to use all of their embryos, is this considered child abandonment? If the freezer malfunctions and all of the embryos get destroyed, does the manufacturer of this freezer, are they charged with negligent homicide? If these are extrauterine children, can we be claiming these children on our taxes? It really makes you wonder, and a lot of healthcare professionals are talking about how this is, a direct result of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. We just keep seeing more and more of women's rights being taken away, and their reproductive rights in particular. And it's scary. It honestly is scary. A lot of this is really tying into religious beliefs, and we're really just seeing more of religion in our politics. And regardless of what you believe, I do not think that there is any place for religion in legislation and in making laws. There's actually this clip I saw of this Republican senator, and if I can find it, I'll put it in here, because he was talking about how, we need more children. He thought pausing on these IVF clinics was a great idea. And it really just shows how little he knows of what actually is IVF. IVF is all about children. How are you pro-life and yet anti-IVF? Otherwise, these families would not be having children. And if I can find the clip, I'll put it in, because it's just really interesting. It just really gives you a clear picture of how little these elected officials understand the science. Really just has a lot of religious undertones of their decision making. Religion has no place in politics. These decisions, they should be between the patient, the healthcare professional, their provider, their spouse. These elected officials really should have no say in any of this.
A Supreme Court ruling on the fact that embryos are children?
Yeah, I was all for it. We need to have more kids. We need to have an opportunity to do that. And I thought this was the right thing to do. But
IVF is used to have more children, and right now IVF services are paused at some of the clinics in Alabama. Aren't you concerned that this could impact people who are trying to have kids?
Well, that's for another conversation. People need to have. We need more kids. We need the people to have the opportunity to have kids.
Senator, what do you say to the women right now in Alabama who no longer have access to IVF, or who will not, as a result of this ruling? What do you say to them?
Well, that's a hard one. It really is. It's really hard. Because, again, you want people to have that opportunity. And that's what I was telling her. We need more kids.
Yeah, I just thought that was pretty comical to listen to. Clearly, the man is not up to date on what IVF is. Because on one hand, he's talking about how, we need more children. And on the other hand, he's saying he's happy these IVF clinics are pausing. Just makes no sense. Just clearly makes no sense. It's comical, but it's also scary because it's real life, and these are actually our elected politicians and officials and lawmakers. If you're paying attention, you can't help but be a little afraid for our rights and our future generations, their rights. I have a daughter. I'm terrified. I'm worried for her in the future and what her rights are going to be. Anyways, back to the case. So like I said, I definitely think that this is lawsuit worthy. I mean, they lost their embryos, lots of money, and I'm sure emotionally very distressing. But I cannot fathom that this should qualify as wrongful death of a minor. Let me know. Have you guys heard about this case? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments down below. If you like the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to learn something new every day. I'll talk to you guys soon.